football is in the air. Something new that we've really never seen before. Adding new players to your roster in August, weeks before the season starts. That's what's happened for the Houston Cougars, and boy, oh boy, have they added a couple of players here. Stephon Johnson, Amari Thomas returns, and we figured, this should be a pretty robust passing attack with an all Big 12 receiver. Amari Thomas led the Big 12 in receiving last year. Well, Stephon Johnson is an all Big 12 type receiver who was hurt through points of last year, and he's been granted an extra year of eligibility. So he's practicing now with the Cougs, back with his team. And then Myles Rouser, the all Big 12 safety from Arizona State. Late last night, we learned from Matt Zenitz that he had committed and signed with Houston. So the Cougs adding a safety, probably a spot where they didn't really need to add, but depth is always important. And we talked about Houston's depth or lack thereof as being a potential pitfall. And Stephon Johnson, I mean, when you think about the opportunity for Connor Wigman in this passing attack to add a guy like Stephon Johnson. Now, it remains to be seen what kind of shape they're both in. Johnson in some ways should be a little bit plug and play since he was here last year, but I'm sure some things are different. And we'll hear what Willie Fritz had to say to Joseph Duarte coming up in a moment. But, James, I mean, this is certainly something new to the sport, and, we see this in the NFL, so it seems very similar to that where you're adding players right up until the start of the season.
And this tells me that when we spoke with Eddie Nunez, the athletic director at Houston, he talked about the way they operate financially. To be able to add these two players and players of this caliber, you're not getting these guys for pennies on the dollar. It tells me that they had strategically set some money aside. And Myles Rouser, in terms of production, he's the better of the two. He is an high-impact, all-league safety who's really going to help that secondary that had some questions last year. But Stephon Johnson, he was hurt last year, so he only played in, I think, 5 games. He was able to preserve his red shirt. Maybe it was 2. But he was at Oklahoma State before Houston, highly touted recruit. But when he's been on the field, Houston 2 years ago, Willie Fritz's first year, when they weren't winning a lot of games, he was their only weapon offensively. He had 32 catches, over 400 yards, and then last year, he had a couple of touchdowns, but he averaged over 21 yards per catch when he was on the field. And in the 5 games, he had 13 catches, 275. But to me, the thing that stands out, he was responsible for 2 of Houston's 3 longest plays of the entire season. So he is their vertical stretch the field threat, where Amari Thomas is more that elusive route runner who's a guy that's just rock solid and consistent, but isn't necessarily a weapon over the top. Stephon Johnson changes everything for that offense.
Here's what Willie Fritz said from the Houston practice facility to Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle.
Hey, we're also excited. Stephon Johnson, the Boogie Johnson is his nickname. We feel about as I didn't want to do anything until I was certain. This day and age, I'm not sure what certain is, but I think we feel pretty good about it. And he knows how we run a program, how we do things, and we're excited about having him back. Obviously, he's got to do a couple of helmet days before he can jump back into action, but really excited about it, and we feel, about as good as we can feel that he'll be eligible and be able to play for us this fall.
So Johnson's a huge add. Rouser is interesting because he brings depth. Now, Rouser's been a tackling machine. He's a box safety, right? Like, he's a heat-seeking missile. He's a guy that averaged over 100 tackles or 100 tackles last 2 years at Arizona State. He went undrafted, was at minicamp briefly with the Seattle Seahawks. It's the pro day numbers, I think, as the reason for why he's not an NFL player. A 4.67 40, a 29-inch vertical, 10.3 broad, right? So the measurables are not exactly there for Rouser, but he's just a heat-seeking missile. I mean, 180 some odd tackles the last 2 seasons at Arizona State. And again, whereas Johnson fulfills a need immediately, Rouser seems more like depth because he overlaps with, a pretty good safety pairing already in Allen and Webb, but more so Allen. That's Rouser plays that strong side safety, the box safety position that Allen plays.
Yeah, to me, he just adds another dimension to their defense. Because you're right, when you look at their projected starters in the secondary, you've got guys that were either starters last year or guys that were brought in as transfers to be starters. A guy like Jalen Mayo, who comes over from Tulane. Javion White was an FCS All-American at Stephen F. Austin. So this adds another depth piece to that secondary. With Stephon Johnson, he's going to be more plug-and-play because him and Connor Wegman have a relationship that runs deep. They have known each other since they were in grade school. They grew up playing 7-on-7 with each other. They were teammates all throughout their youth football days. And Stephon Johnson is the reason. He was the #1 recruiter for bringing Connor Wegman to Houston when he transferred from Texas A&M. So that relationship is going to make Stephon Johnson an immediate high-leverage impact guy who I think will be on the field day one. With Rouser, it just adds flexibility. Like, they use Brandon Mack as kind of a linebacker / edge rusher / safety. He's listed as a jack position. So he's all over the field, and that's kind of how I see Rouser. Rouser can blitz. Rouser can play linebacker. Rouser can be a 6th defensive back on the field. I just love the versatility that he brings to that defense.
Yeah, here's what Willie Fritz said about the health and status currently of Stephon Johnson.
He's 100%. He's he's come over here a few times and worked out. I just didn't want to do anything until we knew for certain, that this was going to be good. And the great thing about it is we're running the same offense. Basically, he's got the same coaches. So it's not going to be easy for him because he's 9 months behind. But he's a hard-working guy, and he'll do a great job.
Yeah, so 9 months behind, he mentions, but he's a hard-working guy. He'll do a great job. That's Willie Fritz, courtesy of Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle. And then here's what Fritz said about Johnson getting caught up to speed, being, quote-unquote, 9 months behind.
He's going to put his time, effort, and energy and earn his ability to play as much as he, wants to play. I'm sure he's got big-time goals, and we'll just see where it's at. So it's luckily we got a couple weeks before week 1, so he'll even though it's the same offense, he still needs to get back into terminology. There's some things we've tweaked. There's some plays we're running. It's different, personnel groupings, things like that. Signals, he's got to get back into that. But he'll do a great job. He's a smart young man.
All right, so James, with Stephon Johnson and Myles Rouser eventually being integrated into the team, does this change how you feel about the Big 12? We talked yesterday about the 7 different bowl projections from On3 and CBS Sports and ESPN and all the publications, and all of them basically had Houston somewhere between 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the league, but high, but not winning the Big 12 championship. 0 for 7 in the 7 that we looked at. Does this change that for you? Are they part of that Texas Tech, BYU upper echelon tier, or are they still kind of in tier 2 by themselves?
So I think in terms of roster construction and talent, yeah, I would put them up there. The thing that I just continue to circle back to is their schedule is so much more challenging than it was last year that to have a similar record, they had to be better in terms of their talent. How much are these guys going to be on the field weeks 1 and 2 still remains to be seen. A lot of times transfers that come in, it takes them 4 or 5 games to get acclimated, to get a real grasp of the program and the playbook and alignments and communication styles and all those different things. With these guys getting such a late start, I don't know that you can count on them right away to be huge difference makers. So with Houston, in terms of their talent, yes. Like, I ran a chaos simulator, for lack of a better term, yesterday. Matt Enzor sent out some great notes on the Big 12 and just kind of the conference as a whole with the quarterback stuff that we've talked about at length. And so I'm thinking, all right, the Big 12's had 9 teams preseason ranked in the top 25 the last 2 years. Only one of those 9 has finished the year ranked in the top 25.
Wow.
So recent history tells me it's going to be another chaotic year. who are the teams that were missing. But Houston was the one team that just continued to be in the top 3, top 4, top 5 at worst in the Big 12 through all these different simulations. So you'd have some shockers like UCF finishing in the top 4. But Houston was the one that just, with their roster and Willie Fritz's track record, the consistency was there. And so what does that look like? Is that 8-4? Or is that 10-2 or 11-1? The thing for me is they've got to win some really tough road games, but they have the talent now to do it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I still wouldn't put them in that Texas Tech BYU upper tier, but I mean, this obviously improves their roster, and if they have these guys up to speed and ready to go by week 3 when they play Tech, you know, that game, especially with the dynamic of Stephon Johnson and Amari Thomas on the outside and the differences you outlined, could be a huge difference maker in that. Speaking of Texas Tech,